Greetings friends, and welcome back to 7 Science Questions and Why They Matter. In this video, we will explain that Darwinism is horribly out of date from a scientific perspective. Yes, you heard that right. In the wake of modern science, there is no way that anyone should still believe in this idea that came from the early 1800s. Friends, there's absolutely no real science behind the fairy tale that simple living organisms could evolve by chance into higher organisms having millions of times more complexity than their biological ancestors. Did you know that it has never been observed that evolutionary processes have added any information to the genome? And this would have had to have happened millions of times for Darwinist evolution to be true. Even then, if random processes could produce highly complex new capabilities by chance, this still does not explain how the first forms of life began on Earth. Now, this was not a big problem in Charles Darwin's mind. It's because he looked into the crude microscopes that were available in his day, and he saw living cells having only 3 parts: a membrane, a nucleus, and a nucleolus. To Darwin, the cell looked to be nothing more than a blob of jelly and an outer membrane with a little dot inside. The idea that, under right conditions, basic molecular ingredients could combine to form this simple structure was not very hard for him to imagine. The theory that chance random conditions could result in the transformation of non-living chemicals into the basic cells of life is called naturalism. This concept is still commonly believed in today, but it shouldn't be. Why do I say that? Well, it's for this reason. Since Darwin's time, through modern technology and nanomicroscopy, we have learned that the cell is massively complex, perhaps on the order of 1,000,000 times more complex than Darwin would have been thinking. Do you think I'm exaggerating? Let's see what some of today's leading biologists have to say about the difference between today's understanding of the cell compared to what was known in Darwin's era.
Guaranteed I can blow your mind.
The following excerpt is taken from Ben Stein's powerful documentary entitled Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Darwin wrote The Origin of Species in 1859, published it in 1859. He had an idea of the cell as being quite simple, correct?
Yeah, everybody did.
Okay. If he thought of the cell as being a Buick, what is the cell now in terms of its complexity by comparison?
A galaxy.
If Darwin thought a cell was, say, a mud hut, what do we now know that a cell is?
More complicated than a Saturn V.
So what is in a cell as far as we know now?
A world that Darwin never could have imagined.
I needed someone who could give me a glimpse into this world. So we went to molecular biologist Doug Axe.
Think of a cell as being a nanofactory, a factory where, on a very small scale, digital instructions are being used to make the components of the factory. Here we have the famous DNA double helix. You can see the 2 helical strands that are intertwined and wind around each other on the outside of the molecule. This is the material that stores all of our genetic information. In higher life forms, this will be the equivalent of something like a gigabyte of information stored in the molecules that form the individual chromosomes, all packed within the nucleus, which is a tiny fraction of the entire cell size. So what does DNA do? Well, the information in DNA ends up providing the information for sequencing amino acids to make protein.
The intricate and masterfully designed mechanisms of the inner cell are fascinating. Starting with the discovery of DNA by Francis Crick and James Watson in 1953, we have learned that each of our cells is an amazing biological micro-machine driven by digitally encoded blueprint that is stored in our DNA molecules. The cell can manufacture, on demand, any one of the many thousands of types of protein needed at any time to sustain our life functions. Amazingly, within the cell, something called messenger RNA travels to the nucleus of the cell and records a digital copy of the information needed for the new proteins. Then it delivers the instructions for the protein creation to the ribosome, which reads the code from the messenger RNA and completes the building of the new protein in an area called the endoplasmic reticulum, or ER. Then the last step is to deliver the new protein to the site where it is needed. This is done by incredible little carriers called motor proteins, which literally pick up the new protein sac or vesicle and walk in a biped fashion, placing one foot in front of another along tiny highways within the cell called microtubules. Friends, this extremely simplified explanation is not made-up science fiction. This fantastically designed process is actually happening in each cell of every living creature. Now let's take a look at a video created by molecular geneticist Dr. Georgia Purdome to get an idea of what this looks like.
Now that the proteins have been modified inside this ER, okay, once they've had their changes occur, they next need to get to their final location. Here we go. So these little vesicles kind of pinch off the ER that have the proteins in them, and then you're going to see this guy right here. Okay? This is called a motor protein, and it's got a very big cargo here from the ER that has those proteins inside of it, and it's walking. It's walking along structures inside the cell. Let's see another photo of that. Here we go. Okay, this is called a microtubule. And this motor protein literally walks step by step by step. Every time it takes a step, it uses energy. This is going on inside of every cell that you have in your body all the time.
Note that the animation used in Dr. Purdome's presentation was created by scientists at Harvard University. A link to the full video from Harvard is included in the description of this post. Okay, now that we understand the overwhelming complexity of the cell, with its thousands upon thousands of specifically designed parts, realize it is no longer rational or scientifically credible to believe that such a highly orchestrated system of components could arise by chance. The odds against it are staggering, and no reasonable mind would still believe this in today's world. So, what about those who still cling to this antiquated idea? Well, theirs is a religion of atheism, and they can only maintain their position through blind faith or the ignorance of the facts. Once again, we find that when men attempt to remove God from his creation, they paint themselves into an unscientific corner. Now, since the Bible gets it right every time, perhaps you should take another look. If you read the New Testament, you will realize that God entered history in the form of Jesus, the Christ, so that you could be forgiven of your sins, have a second chance in this life, and received his love gift of eternity in heaven. So, until next time, remember that the most intellectual position a person can take is to believe in the powerful and historical spiritual truths revealed in his book, the Bible. We'll see you next time here on 7 Science Questions and Why They Matter, and may you eternally live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper. Image of Sirac.